This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Hi, Amy. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, the Ransom, that's the name of a major series of articles published by the New York Times detailing how Haiti became one of the poorest countries in the world while bankers in France and the United States made a fortune. The story dates back to the early 19th century. In 1804, the enslaved people of Haiti rose up, leading a rebellion against French colonial rule, founding the world's first Black republic. Under military threat from France in 1825, Haiti agreed to pay reparations to France for lost so-called property, including enslaved people that French owners lost in the rebellion. France threatened to invade Haiti and reimpose slavery if Haiti did not agree to a staggering amount in reparations, 150 million francs, 30 times Haiti's annual revenue. Haiti began taking out loans from French banks, leading to an economic crisis that continues through to this day. The New York Times estimates Haiti paid the equivalent of what's now $560 million to France over the next 7 decades. The true economic cost to Haiti is estimated to be an astounding $115 billion. And that only tells a part of the story. In 1880, a French bank established Haiti's first national bank, essentially putting France in control of Haiti's treasury. That bank, Crédit Industriel et Commercial, used some of its massive profits to help finance the Eiffel Tower. The bank's current owner has just launched an investigation into its dealings with Haiti and its role in what's called the ecosystem of colonialism. That bank, CIC.
The role of Wall Street and European banks in controlling the economies, not just of Haiti, but of Honduras, of Nicaragua, of Cuba, of many of these countries in Latin America, part of the operational mode of American imperialism.
Most definitely. And I think that the series, laudable as it has been, could also have made a contribution if it had pointed out the close connections between France and the United States. That is to say, in the 20th century, they began to talk about the Citibank and Citicorp and how it was involved in the depredations inflicted upon Haiti. But I think that if you were to go back to the Haitian Revolutionary period, you would also find similar connections. After all, we know that what became the United States was involved in a revolt against London that would not have succeeded without the assistance of France. We know that there was substantial French migration to states, and that Frenchmen were involved in similar depredations in Louisiana and slave owning, for example. We know that when Texas seceded from Mexico in 1836, that Texas's major diplomatic ally on the international front happened to be France. And we also know that when the United States Civil War erupted, 1861 to 1865, it was France that opportunistically chose that moment to try to seize and occupy Mexico, and then extend the lease on life of slavery in Texas and throughout the South by welcoming slave owners from Texas and from Dixie into French-occupied Mexico. And it took a mass revolt by the Mexican people to overturn that particular scheme. So there is much more digging and excavation that needs to be done. And I would like to reiterate my call for the New York Times to open the kimono and to disgorge these documents they say that they have uncovered in France, so that other scholars and other researchers can examine same.
We haven't even talked about the Louisiana Purchase, but we can't in this show. However, I want to end on the crisis that Haitians confront today when they try to come into the United States. I think it was last September the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned in protest over the Biden administration's policies. In a letter, the longtime diplomat, U.S. Envoy to Haiti, Daniel Foote, wrote, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees." Foote also criticized the Biden administration for meddling in Haiti's political affairs, including its support for Ariel Henry as prime minister following the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in July. Foote's resignation came just days after U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback were filmed chasing, grabbing, and whipping Haitian asylum seekers who gathered in that makeshift camp in Del Rio, Texas. We only have a minute, Professor Alsanat, but the issue of Haitian refugees being deported by the thousands back to a devastated Haiti.
Oh, well, real quick, I think what you've just demonstrated is that Haiti stands as a singular metaphor for understanding the racial legacy of imperial powers like the United States and France. In fact, as the war in Ukraine is happening, the sheer magnitude of the difference in the treatment of certain refugees because of their European background relative to, say, Haitians, as you just showed in terms of what's happening at the border. That's a very revealing example of what Haiti not only means to the United States, but what it means to the world at large in terms of populations from formerly colonized geographies, as well as Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country who knows something about the treatment of racism at the hands of the U.S. government. So in many ways, Haiti should be looked at as a singular metaphor for explaining so many of these various mistreatments and levels of preference for different groups. And I think the more we learn about Haiti, the more we realize how our fate, and this is not an overstatement, our fate is actually directly connected to it if we are going to better understand what world we're living in with regards to how the powers that be intend to engineer the world towards imperialism.
Our fates intertwined, going right back to the U.S. not recognizing Haiti's independence for decades, fearing that a slave uprising would inspire enslaved people in the United States to rise up. Weston Lee Alsanat, thanks so much for being with us, Haitian American professor.